Nobody in Cedar Hollow ever imagined the man they warned their daughters about would be the reason a police officer opened her eyes again. And nobody, least of all him, ever thought that a routine ride home would end with his hands soaked in someone else's blood, fighting to keep a stranger tethered to this world. Before the town started arguing about heroes and reputations, before a department built on suspicion had to swallow its pride, there was just a road, a storm, and a decision that took less than 3 seconds to make, but would echo for months. The night the sky over Route 9 broke apart, most sane people were already home. Sheets of rain came down sideways, hammering the blacktop so hard it sounded like static. Somewhere beneath all that noise, a single headlight cut through the dark, slow, steady, unhurried. Dean Preacher Holloway wasn't in a rush. He never was on nights like this. The rain didn't scare him. It just meant fewer cars, fewer eyes, fewer reasons for anyone to give him the look he'd gotten used to ignoring years ago. His jacket bore the insignia of the Iron Wraiths, a patch that made grown men cross the street and mothers pull their kids a little closer. He didn't ride expecting trouble. He rode because the road was the only place that ever felt uncomplicated. He almost missed it. That's the part that still keeps him up some nights. How close he came to riding straight past the one moment that would define the rest of the year. A shape at the edge of his headlight beam, wrong in a way his gut recognized before his brain caught up. A cruiser, half swallowed by the drainage ditch, its front end crumpled against a bent guardrail like it had been thrown there. No flashing lights, no siren, just settled. Hissing steam and silence. He eased off the throttle before he'd even decided to stop. Something primal in him, the kind of instinct that doesn't ask permission, pulled him toward the wreck. And that's when the lightning gave him a second to see what the darkness had been hiding. A body on the gravel's shoulder, unmoving. Rain pooling around her like the storm itself was trying to wash something away. For half a heartbeat, every warning he'd ever been given about cops flickered through his mind. Keep riding, not your problem. This never ends well for someone like you. But then he saw her hand, stretched toward the wreck, fingers curled like she'd been trying to crawl back to something. Or someone. That image broke whatever hesitation was left in him. He killed the engine and swung off the bike before it had even stopped rocking, boots hitting the flooded gravel hard. The woman wore the uniform of the Cedar Hollow Police Department, her badge dulled by rain and dirt, her shoulder torn open in a way that made his stomach turn. Officer Maya Castillo, though he wouldn't learn her name until much later, lay on her side, blood threading into the rainwater beneath her in slow, dark ribbons. He dropped to his knees without thinking twice. 2 fingers pressed to her throat. A pulse. Faint, but there, stubborn and fighting. Her breathing came in short, ragged pulls, like her body was rationing what little air it had left. He scanned the scene fast, the way you learn to when your entire life has trained you to notice things other people miss. Driver's door wide open, holster empty. Radio smashed somewhere under the back tire, sparking uselessly in the rain. This wasn't just a crash. Somebody had done this to her. He didn't waste time thinking about what that meant. He tore his own jacket off, ignoring the rain instantly soaking through his shirt, and pressed the leather hard against the wound in her side, the one bleeding worse than anything else, the one that told him exactly how little time they had. He pushed down with everything he had, feeling her flinch weakly under his palms. "Hey," he said, leaning close enough that his voice could cut through the wind. "Stay with me. You don't get to check out yet." Her eyelids fluttered. No words came, just the faintest tremor of breath. He fumbled his phone out with one hand, smearing blood across the screen, and dialed for help. When the dispatcher picked up, there was a pause after he gave his name, the kind of pause that told him exactly what she was thinking about a man from a motorcycle club calling in an officer down. He didn't have patience for it. "She's alive," he said flatly. "But not for long, if nobody moves." He kept talking to her after that, low and constant, the way you'd talk to someone standing on a ledge. He told her to think about her family, about whatever mess of paperwork was waiting on her desk, about the stupid vending machine coffee she probably complained about every morning. He didn't know if any of it was true. It didn't matter. He just needed her to have somewhere to go besides the dark closing in around her. The wind picked up, rocking his parked bike, rain plastering his hair flat against his skull as he leaned over her like a makeshift shelter. And then, faint under the thunder, he heard it. Sirens, more than one, growing louder by the second. When the first cruisers finally screeched onto the scene, officers spilled out with weapons raised, and for a moment the whole world seemed to freeze around what they were looking at. A man in an outlaw motorcycle club's colors, drenched and bloodied, kneeling over one of their own. Dean didn't move fast. He didn't argue. He kept his hands exactly where they were and looked up through the rain. "She's still breathing," he said, calm as he could manage. "Somebody get her out of here." What happened next unfolded in pieces, officers shouting commands, paramedics shoving through, one of them ripping back the soaked jacket to check the wound and immediately demanding, "Who packed this?" "I did," Dean said. The paramedic didn't answer right away, just looked up at him with something between disbelief and gratitude. "It's the only reason she's still got a pulse." They pulled Dean back anyway, not violently, but firmly, training overriding whatever hesitation flickered across their faces. He didn't resist. He stood in the rain and watched them work over her, cutting fabric, starting lines, calling out numbers that made the paramedics move even faster. Her lips had gone pale, almost blue, and someone shouted that her blood pressure was crashing. They loaded her into the ambulance as a sergeant approached Dean, eyes locked on the patch stitched across his chest like it was evidence, all on its own. "Start talking," the sergeant said. "What exactly happened out here?" Dean kept it simple. He was riding through. He saw the wreck. He found her already on the ground, no weapon, no suspect in sight, just a dying officer and a storm that didn't care either way. The sergeant studied him like he was waiting for the story to crack. "You expect me to believe you just happened to stop?" "Believe whatever you want," Dean said. "Pull the traffic cameras." They did exactly that. Within the hour, while Dean sat in the back of a cruiser, not cuffed, but not exactly free either, a lieutenant reviewed the grainy footage from a camera 2 miles down the highway. It showed precisely what he'd said, his bike slowing near the wreck, no other vehicles anywhere in sight. No struggle, no hesitation. The timestamp told its own story, too. He'd arrived nearly 10 minutes before the first 911 call came in from a trucker who'd spotted flashing lights much later down the road. 10 minutes that could have been the difference between Officer Castillo living or bleeding out completely alone on the shoulder of a forgotten highway. Back at the hospital, once the chaos settled into hushed hallway conversations, a trauma surgeon told the gathered officers just how close it had actually been. The wound had nicked something vital, something that would have emptied her out in minutes if nobody had stopped the bleeding immediately. "Whoever packed that wound," the surgeon said plainly, "is the reason she made it through the door alive." Nobody in that waiting room said much after that. Dean sat off to the side near the vending machines, wrapped in a hospital blanket someone had handed him without a word, his jacket now sealed away as evidence. A young officer approached him carefully. "You could have kept riding," she said. He didn't look up right away. Yeah, he admitted. I could have. That single sentence sat heavy in the air because everyone in that department understood exactly what it meant. Years of friction between local law enforcement and the iron wraiths hovered unspoken around the room. The traffic stops that turned into shouting matches. The surveillance. The courtroom battles neither side ever really won. And yet here was the man with a record full of exactly the kind of trouble they expected from him. And he was the one who hadn't hesitated when it counted. Near sunrise, the captain arrived, gray-haired and unreadable, and walked straight up to Dean. "You understand this is complicated," he said carefully. Dean gave a short nod. "It usually is." The captain extended a hand, not friendship, just acknowledgement. "She's out of surgery, still touch and go." Dean shook it once. "She's tougher than she looks." By mid-morning, word had already spread through the department before the news ever caught wind of it. Officer Critical, saved by a member of a motorcycle club most of them had spent years trying to shut down. The irony landed heavy on everyone who heard it. 3 weeks later, Maya asked to see him. Her recovery had been slow. Tubes removed one at a time, color creeping back into her face day by day. She didn't remember much about the crash itself, but she remembered the voice. The one that told her not to quit. When her captain gave her the update, suspect caught 2 counties over, her weapon recovered, the internal review clearing her of any fault, she surprised him with a simple request. "I want to meet him." "Maya, you understand who he is," the captain said carefully. "I understand what he did," she replied. "That's what matters to me." Getting Dean to agree wasn't easy. He'd gone right back to his routine after hearing she'd survived surgery, turning down every reporter who tried to track him down through scanner chatter. He hadn't done any of it for attention, and he wasn't about to start now. When the department reached out asking if he'd consider a visit, his first answer was no. "I don't walk into police buildings," he said. "Never ends well." But when they told him it was Maya asking, not for cameras, not for headlines, just her, he went quiet for a long moment before finally saying, "Somewhere public." Then he showed up without an entourage, just boots, jeans, and that same unmistakable jacket against the hospital's sterile white walls. Conversations in the hallway died down as he passed. Some officers recognized him from the footage. Others just recognized the patch. And old instincts flared before curiosity took over. Inside the room, Maya looked smaller than she had on patrol, a thin scar visible near her collarbone where surgeons had done their work. But her eyes were steady, clear. "Alive you stayed," she said. It wasn't a question. Dean shrugged. "Yeah, you could have kept going." Didn't feel right. Something flickered across her face. Not dramatic, just honest. "They told me everything. The shirt, the pressure, the call you made. Anyone would have done the same," he muttered, uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. "Not anyone," she said quietly. She reached out slowly, careful of the IV line, and Dean stepped forward to shake her hand, firm but gentle, aware of exactly how fragile she still was. In that small gesture, something shifted between 2 people who'd spent their whole lives standing on opposite sides of an invisible line. Weeks later, when Maya returned to the precinct for the first time, the bullpen erupted into applause nobody had planned. She hugged her partner, thanked her coworkers, and then asked the question that caught everyone off guard. "Is he here?" The captain nodded toward the back wall, where Dean stood looking distinctly out of place under the fluorescent lights. Maya crossed the room, and every officer watched as she stopped in front of him and said, loud enough for the whole department to hear, "I'm standing here because he didn't drive past." The captain stepped forward with a small plaque. Nothing flashy, no press conference, no cameras. Just a quiet acknowledgement of civilian bravery. Dean accepted it with a nod, scanning a room full of faces that had shifted from suspicion to something closer to respect. It didn't erase years of tension between two worlds that rarely understood each other. But it created a moment none of them could pretend away. That evening, as Dean walked back to his bike outside the precinct, Maya followed him out. "My partner told me he almost drove right past that spot," she said. "Storm made visibility next to nothing," Dean replied, eyes on the horizon. "I'm glad you didn't." He pulled his gloves on, ready to ride. "Me too," as his engine roared back to life and he disappeared down the road. Something quieter but far more lasting stayed behind in that department. New officers going through training would hear about that night. Not as legend, not as spectacle, but as a reminder that courage doesn't check what patch someone's wearing before it decides to show up. On a storm-soaked highway outside a town that never expected a story like this, none of the old labels meant anything. There was only a choice, made in seconds by a man everyone had already decided they understood. If this story moved you even a little, stick around, because there are more stories like this one waiting. Moments where the line between hero and outcast blurs completely, and I promise you won't see the next one coming either.